So why don't we move on to gathering and connecting with students, contacts and tracking them. So Keith, why don't you start our conversation here about that? What does it look like for you to collect contacts, and what are some ways we track our students?
Well, I start collecting, especially for incoming students, I start collecting their information as soon as I possibly can. Just yesterday, Wednesday, the 17th of July, I mailed 200 cards with welcome students to UNG with stickers. They filled out a form for a welcome gift, and that's after the big email of sending it to 1,900 incoming students. And so we start early with just getting their contact information, and so that was the first contact was with the email. Now they're getting a card in the mail from a handwritten card by one of our students, and then I will send another email as well, just following up. And so we'll take those names and we'll work our way down our leadership team and try to set up a one-on-one with them. The key word there is we try. But our goal is to try to get about 3 or 4 contacts and important touches with them before they get to campus. And then that's just where we start with the incoming, but every Monday we're out on campus doing outreach. And when I say outreach, our intended goal is to share Jesus with a student that's our goal, is to present the gospel with a student. It doesn't always happen. It may just be a connection point. But I've trained all of our leaders is that if they make a contact, they're the ones that are following up with the student with that contact, if it's a viable contact. If they want to know more about the ministry, if they share Jesus and they got follow-up questions, that student that made that contact is the one that is following up. So it doesn't come into a database and somebody else is following up. That student So a student on a typical week could have 4 or 5 people that they're following up with. And inviting them and letting them know what's going on. For our large groups, if we have new students coming in, we have every week we have a different group of leaders that is assigned for that week. And so if we get new people and they fill out a card and we know that there are new students, they will reach out to them and just thank them for coming. Hey, can we grab coffee? Can we meet? So that's kind of how we get contacts and follow up. But one of the unique things that we have created here at UNG is that we're not a small college, but we're not a large college. I mean, we're kind of in the middle. We have about 8,000 students on our campus, and we are a close-knit group. And so you'll be in a class with a person that you may have talked to, so it's not the first time that you've seen them on campus, or you see them in the gym. And so a lot of our students, so from that, they've have relationships and they'll start sharing with their friends. And so it's the initial may have been in the classroom, the second one may be in our outreach, the third may be in their gym. And so the same student is being consistent of sharing Christ with them and just showing them the love that he has shown to them. And so that's kind of how we get kind of contacts. We don't run a whole database of a following. We put a lot of onus on our leaders and staff to if you make the contact, you are the ones that is doing the follow up, because you kind of know the conversations that you have, where it was left off, and so.
But before we move on to Adam or Brian, I want to make a comment real quick. I think Keith, it's some people will be watching this video, and maybe even Adam and Brian are saying this too. You have some access that a lot of campuses don't have access to, like the ability to gather and get information that the university gives you. And I want to say first that the easy thing for us to do is say, well, that will never happen on my campus, right? And so that's not really helpful for me. But I don't think that's necessarily true, because I think there are some campuses that will let you do that if we ask, right?
Yes.
And now, no, a lot won't, but but it's important to say, hey, sometimes you don't know what access you have to students until you make that bold ask.
Yeah.
And so that's a gift that you have that you don't let um,
I,
go by the wayside.
Yeah.
And so
And it's changed over the years of how we have to ask for it. I mean, that's a great point, Ben, is that it has changed from which department we now have to go and we ask for that information. But you're absolutely right, is even if even if they weren't sending, we couldn't get those names, we would still do a huge social media campaign to share with people in our area. Hey, if you got an incoming student, um, and so we're also fortunate that I have a lot of students that work on our campus. Like my vice president is an orientation leader and of our school, and she can't talk about BCM unless it is brought up. But she has said over and over, students are very excited about coming and being a part of Baptist Collegiate Ministry here at North Georgia. And then so that allows her to talk about her experience of BCM. And so we're making a name without even knowing that we're making a name across the state of Georgia, because students are just coming here already excited about being a part of what we're doing. And we haven't even made a contact. And so,
yeah.
but you definitely you can use social media because people will reach out and fill out. And so if you can't, but definitely I think you can ask. So
I have a campus who for years would be given information from, they call them religious preference cards,
yeah.
and they would get them and they would be able to access and connect with those students, and then their campus just stopped giving them away. And you can have a couple different responses. Some will say you need to fight the campus for those, and that's fine. But I think regardless, our response should always be to not be defeated. Like we just have to be tenacious and going after students. And so what this campus has responded, it has caused them to have to basically pivot the way they get contacts, and it is, they don't necessarily get more contacts than they had before, but they get better follow-up and more genuine contacts now because of the way they pivoted, which was being a lot more tabling on campus during during move-in days and finding creative ways to connect with students. All right, let's keep going. So Adam, Brian, what are some ways you guys connect with students and get contacts and track students and so forth?
Well, I do want to follow up on the using the administration, because on my campus, I've gone from nothing to we have asked, and it's a private university and people make good decisions. And they have been able to, in the past, given us religious preferences and things like that. And we can use the administration to actually kind of get into that context. So definitely you don't have it until you ask. And sometimes you might even be the first person asking that question. And it just depends on who you're asking. They're like, they'll think it through and they might answer yes, they might answer no. But then after that, I was on I mean, the campus keeps, our campus now no longer collects that information. So there is no religious preference survey among incoming students. So they don't have the information to give us anymore. So we had to pivot away from having that information as well. So I've been at Drexel long enough that we've seen getting the permission to get that kind of information and then losing it already. But and that's one thing, like longevity helps you connect and do that stuff. There are people on my campus answering these questions that just assume I've always been there. Um, but with that, and it's interesting to see how one thing we've learned in the Northeast, especially in a city, you don't give your contact information to people you don't know. That's just not what's going to happen. But we've learned that the more and more we look legitimate, the more and more we look like we're part of Drexel, like getting the Drexel contact information is interesting. Being a recognized student group on campus, being, you know, officially tabling someplace, like we do a lot better when it looks like we're organized through the university to get student information than it is than if we're just some random group that wandered onto campus, because in a city there are random groups on our campus all the time. So the way we are perceived on campus is very, very important. We have to look like we're part of the university to be able to overcome the stranger danger sort of preconceived ideas. And following up, like, with students, I have, and this is a huge pivot for me probably since COVID, the amount of students that were willing to meet one-on-one with me versus the amount of students that are willing to meet one-on-one with another student has drastically shifted. I used to just be able to, kind of make a lot of the follow-up connections myself. That is no longer the way it is. Maybe it's because I have more gray hair, maybe it's because I'm older, maybe because I'm just more intimidating. I don't know. Um, but shifting from me being the primary follow-up to me resourcing students to be the primary follow-up for contacts has been a major, major shift. And that one, I should have been doing that anyways, because that's multiplication. Students can reach more folks than just me myself, but it was also a little humbling. Why aren't they emailing me back? Why aren't they talking to me back? Why aren't they? But they're scheduling with my student leader. Like, I had to get over myself on that a little bit. But yeah, just making sure students are equipped to do that, and maybe leading on students in a way that changes your perspective. And if Arliss Dickerson was here, he would probably comment something about me shifting into a different season of campus ministry, of a campus ministry leader and that sort of stuff. But yeah, those were some of the ideas. Use use and ask for whatever administrative resources are available through the university, and use students to get and follow up contacts. It's absolutely vital in the Northeast, where we are trained from birth to see a bunch of strangers that we're not supposed to talk to and not supposed to give them information.
Yeah, but I would say that shift to getting your student leaders to follow up is what we want anyways,
Yeah.
right? It's the trainings and the gifts and skills you're giving your student leaders to learn how to do that will last beyond their time with us as campus ministers. And then we're sending them to churches and sending them to their jobs, learning how to engage people that they don't know how to engage, which I think is a skill that's being lost now. And so and I think that's what we want. Anyways, Adam, what are some thoughts you have?
Yeah, I think of when it comes to recruitment to the university. So I played football at a Division II school, and I was very bad. So I don't want that to sound like I was like real good at it. I was like pretty trash. But the recruiting process for me, with like talking to coaches and stuff like that, man, when I got into campus ministry from church-based college ministry, like that was one of the things that there was just so much familiarity, because like a lot of what we're doing is just simply recruitment. Even on the evangelism side, all you're doing in evangelism is just sharing with people information that would allow them to change their mind about a particular thing. Like that's all recruitment is for any organization ever. And so I just think when it comes to recruitment, just having a process that you use and knowing kind of what that process is just a big important part of it, and knowing how the university recruits students. So, is there a difference on your campus from like a high school orientation deal where they have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and like a senior only, these are coming to campus next year type of event? Some schools have like very strict designations for those things. Some of them, they just kind of mix them all in together. Like at USC, during the calendar year, they run like campus tours 3 to 4 times a day, if not more, where in the summertime is the only time that they do new student orientation. And so knowing those two differences is really important. And then we utilize things like what Keith kind of utilizes too. Like, man, students, they will, like, if they're interested in being in a religious organization or what it has to do, they'll sign up for like a welcome bag or something like that. You just kind of got to throw it out there and kind of ask them if they want to. One of the things I did a couple of years ago was I surveyed like 50 campus ministers and college-based ministers, and asked the question, how do you recruit students? And I'll never kind of forget like the culmination of the results. The people that did the best job recruiting students used their phone for text and personal calls. And they would intermix both of them. Like, they would text sometimes, they would call sometimes, but they were doing both, and they used their own personal or like ministry phone number to do that. They didn't use like a ministry phone that, has got the cord and stuff on it. It was very accessible. It was on places on their website where if students were Googling more about that information, they would also see a picture of their face and their phone number. I think some of those things, when you're talking about what Brian was saying, like, you want people to feel more comfortable about you being legitimate. Does that make sense? And not just like this random place. And websites don't cost a lot. You can set them up where you really don't have to mess with them a ton, but your information is on there. Websites are a huge part of our recruitment. And you don't have to use all forms of social media. We primarily only use Instagram. Facebook, we have it, and we use it, but it's more for our churches and our alumni. And I think in your context, you kind of got to know what tools you use for certain things and what the clientele is for that particular deal. And when it comes to contacts, I'm trying to think of like a few things that I would say that are unique or different that we do that they haven't said already. We do a lot of the same stuff that Keith and Brian have talked about. We check everybody in when they come to our worship services. We have a welcome team that does that. So everybody that comes to our worship service night, for the most part, sometimes we miss people like regularly, but not like the goal is for the student leaders to get better at not missing people. We check everybody into a database. We use Breeze for our contact management stuff. When it comes to event promotion, so ministry recruitment, event promotion, and personal evangelism, those are three, they're distinct things. Sometimes they all get mixed in together, but sometimes we do specific things for each one of those deals. When we do ministry recruitment and set up conversations like that, that's when students come into the building, we check them in. At the end of the service, I am primarily, me or one of my staff people, I only have another staff person, so I don't have tons of staff. We almost always are the ones sending post-worship, hey, thanks for coming messages. And I do agree a lot, like with students recruiting students. And even a part of what our ministries do in the eyes of the university, we are a personal and leadership development tool. And I think the more that we get outside of those lanes as ministries, the harder it is for the university to relate with us and for us to be relatable to them. Like, the more that like staff and people are doing things that student leaders aren't doing, I think that some of those things actually kind of hurt ministries' perception nationally with universities when they're super staff heavy and not student leader led. But also in that mix, like, students are, and in Christianity, it is very much so like a mentoring process. So while you do want to have student leaders that disciple down, they're also looking for people that are outside of their season of life that have the wisdom that can speak into their life. And I don't think we need to create lanes where like we only do this or do this. I think every student needs both. They need older student leaders and peers that they're accountable to and they're getting affirmation from. And they need older people that are wise, that are speaking into their life and helping them make good choices. And I think every student that comes into our ministry needs those two groups to be happening simultaneously in their life. So when we use contacts, we try to help them give lanes for both. I primarily send text message follow-ups because, and I'll usually say this in the text message. I'll say, hey, thanks for coming. This is Adam. I'm the director for the BCM. I don't know if I met you, or if I did, I'll put that in there. But this is my personal number. If I could ever be praying for you, if you ever have any questions or anything, if I can help you, I'm happy to. And we utilize both. And I'll talk a little bit more about how our students do that towards the back end. But those are a few of the ways that we use contacts. We try not to be spammy. I think that's a really important thing. We utilize Breeze to send out notifications. The thing that I like about Breeze is it allows them to opt out. So when they get a text message from us, if they don't want like event reminders from from us, they can opt out of that text message. Sometimes when you utilize your own personal numbers of students and different things to always do event reminders, you can just kind of get drowned out. And so, and that's like a game. Like you just always trying to figure out the balance of how to like remind people that stuff's going on, but also like you're personal and want to pray for them. And like, this is like a specific thing relationally built. So those are a few thoughts with contacts.
That's great. I'm gonna wrap this up in just a second, but do y'all know, he's mentioned Breeze. Do y'all know of other software or information gathering technology that you or somebody else has used?
We've done the planning center in the past. We have access to it. We just don't fully utilize it all that much. And so that's been one of the things that we've tried to utilize in the past. It's just hard to get because it's a shared program across the whole state. So it's not an individual. And so it kind of made it a little harder to make it just for UNG. And so I've been looking at, I'm going to check into Breeze myself just to see, because I'm also looking into the texting side as well. And I like the idea of the texting. But I did have a question for Adam when he said checking everybody in on their large group. How does that work? Is it chaos? Or, I mean, because especially if you have a new student, they have to put in their information. I'm just thinking about my contacts and trying to get everybody to do check in and with Breeze, or is it a scan? Hey, then you're checked in. But what does that look like for you, especially because that's a contact? You want to know, okay, so-and-so came to my service, my large group, and I know that we're skipping ahead a little bit here, but it's also a part of the contact. But how do you check everybody in where it's not so chaotic, where a student may say, hey, that was not worth me staying in a line to check in? So.
Yeah, so we use so Breeze actually has a check-in system. It's very similar. Like I'm a dad, and so when people go, we've we've been to different churches and had to check our kids in for preschool and all that kind of stuff. So it has that same function to it. We just try to make it very personal. And so we have multiple students that have like these cheap, they're not iPads, they're like Android tablet things. And but all those tablets do is that one thing. So they check people in. We don't use them for anything else. And like we didn't pay hardly anything for them, but we'll have 4 to 5 students checking people in as they walk in the door. We have like a specific process for like hospitality. And so when students like are welcoming people in from the parking lot to the seat, they try to help them go through that process. And we have, like we have a couple hundred on our worship night. And the better the students have gotten at it, the faster it goes. And it doesn't, like, we don't really get bottlenecked a ton. Now, at the front end of the semesters, depending on how many visitors we have, it can get really slow. But like in Breeze, once the person checks in, you literally, their name's already in the database and you can check them in even faster. Like, so sometimes I'll be standing out in the parking lot, and as people are walking up, I'll go ahead and check them in just from my phone, because you can do it from anything. And so, and that makes it really fast. me and Ryan Scantling, who's at the University of Arkansas for a little bit longer, me and him have done this like the same time, like we kind of did it at the same time. But there probably is a threshold for numbers. Like once you get to so X amount of number people in your worship gathering, you can't really do that anymore. I just haven't hit that number. And we'll have 200-300 in our worship gathering this semester. And so you can do it with that many for sure. And so I think if you got like up to 1,000 or something like that, there might be some problems. You know what I mean? You have to figure out it a different way. But man, for what we do, it works pretty well.
Great. All right. Well, we're going to transition to personal evangelism in just a second, but we'll wrap up some of the things, some notes I made here from what you guys said. There's multiple ways to connect and collect contacts with students. We didn't spend a lot of time on campus stuff. Obviously, tabling, connecting with students, gathering information. We spent some good time talking about the value of our leaders following up with students that they've made contact with, and what that does for our student leaders and how the skills and the gifts that they have there. Practically, we talked about our own events, from software systems and others like Breeze to others to connect, and the value of following up with personal texts. I love what you said, Adam, where from your own research, you found that ministries that use their own personal phones, essentially making themselves more accessible to students, has a value, has a great return on students who connect with your ministries and so forth. A couple times we said the value of making sure that we look legitimate, that we look professional, from website to, I think, even just the flyers we hand out. We want the university to know and our students to know that we have it together, even if we don't feel like we have it together. And so the value of them saying, hey, I'm not just kind of randomly joining this group. This is a group that's existed, it has a strategy, and so forth. I found with students sometimes, even my leaders, I said, this is our strategy for what we're trying to do, and walking students through this pipeline of connection, they get it. And it makes it just seems, it just gives it a lot of legitimacy to that as well. And then following up with students that come is super valuable. The one thing we haven't said that I'm going to add to it, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, is that this is something that happens all year long.
Mhm.
So often we put a lot of effort in those first couple months of collecting contacts and information, and yes, that does require a lot of our attention early, but you need to be doing this from, in a semester system, from August to May, right? Finding ways to collect and connect with students, because you never know who it is that you meet in April, where they are, what they're looking for, and they may even come back next year because of the way you connected with them and so forth.